All right, we are recording, just so you know. Brilliant. All right, and then you prefer Mick?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Mike is very American. So yeah, Mick.
Perfect. All right, we'll jump in. Well, Mick, I want to start by saying thank you so much for being so generous with your time and coming on the Behind the Shield podcast today.
My pleasure. It's just me and two French bulldogs that are running around like lunatics. So no hassle at all. No problems.
Perfect. Well, I have a Union Jack hanging in my office, which I'm not in today, funnily enough. And I see one in the back there. So, where are we finding you on planet Earth today?
Yeah, so I'm in a place called St Owen's Cross, which is a little village basically outside of Hereford, but closer to Ross on Wye. And I'm actually on the posh part of the farm. The working part of the farm is on the other side of the road, and I'm on the nice decent side, if that makes sense. So nice and quiet, great for the dogs. So rural Herefordshire.
Before. Yeah, my granddad was, I think it was my granddad's side, was raised in Herefordshire, in Hereford itself as well. So it's kind of funny that when I got older, I realized that in the military setting, that also is a pretty interesting place.
It is. I class Hereford as home now. I've spent nearly 40 years of my life here. All my kids were born here. They've all been educated here. So yeah, so Hereford really is home.
So let's start at the very beginning of your timeline then. Tell me where you were born and tell me a little bit about your family dynamic, what your parents did, how many siblings.
Yeah, so I was actually born in a military camp in Bulford, which is in Wiltshire. My father was in the military. He was Royal Signals. I went to 14 different schools all around either in the UK or over in Germany. Purely because at that time the military had a bad habit of moving every couple of years. If that makes sense. And so off we went and trotted around the globe really. So I spent 6 years in Germany. Loved playing football, or soccer, as the Americans say. Love playing soccer. Played for every school that I went to. So my up until the age of 15 and a half, all I ever wanted to be was a professional footballer. Mother and father got divorced while we were in Germany. So that forced us really. We came back with my mother. So there was me, my brother, and my sister. Came back to a little town in Lincolnshire, of all places, and did my last sort of 18 month of schooling in Lincolnshire. Had a football trial with Lincoln City, small little town. Went up there, never got picked, unfortunately. So that was a major kick in the backside, really. For a young lad that aspires to be, that's my ambition in life. Now, bizarrely, I never ever had any inclination of joining the military, and the reason being is all the units that that I was with out in Germany, my father was attached to, mainly Royal Artillery. These units have been in Germany for quite a long time, and there was a massive drinking culture in Germany, BAOR as they used to call it. These people walking around fairly large, alcoholically rotund, as we call it, walking didn't really inspire me at all to join the military. So that was the last thing on my mind really. But once I realised that I wasn't going to be a professional footballer, you sit down, you have to be realistic about your options. Unfortunately, academically, not brilliant, because when I came back from Germany, the school syllabus was totally different. So you've got the basic lessons, your geography, history, English, maths, but thereafter it was all totally different. So didn't really do enough to warrant going to college. So I just took plan B and went down to the Army Recruiting Centre in Grimsby. And the one person that really inspired me to join the military was sat at a desk with a paratrooper berry on. Behind him was the perfect sales pitch. and that was people jumping out of an aeroplane. And for a young kid of, well, I was 15 and a half still, 15 and a bit, seeing that, that was a job for me, so I just signed on the dotted line. And I ended up joining Junior Parachute Regiment at 16. In fact, I was 2 months after my 16th birthday.
You mentioned about growing up in Wiltshire. I'm from Corsham originally, just outside Bath, so I was right on the kind of Wiltshire-Avon border. With that being said, though, you had this time in the UK. What was it like through your eyes? I mean, you mentioned about alcoholism and some of the military members that your dad was working with. What was the German experience like for a young English boy?
Fantastic, because I play football, and the Germans are brilliant. So I ended up playing for a little German town. I was 13, 14 years of age, playing for the under 18. So yeah, it was brilliant. For football. I learned a bit of the language. Actually, I love the Germans a bit because they're very direct. Which is great. And to be honest, I thoroughly loved it. One of the first schools I went to was a boarding school up in a place called Wilhelmshaven, which is right on the northern, the Baltic area, and it was an old German naval base, grim as hell, especially in the winter. But we were there for a year, and then they built a brand new school further closer. I say closer. It was more of a bit of a drama because it used to be a 90-minute drive to get to school in the morning, 90-minute back. So it was a bit of a long old drag, really. But yeah, no, Germany, thoroughly loved it. But like I say, no inspiration in joining military at all.
When you mention about the drinking culture in the military, one of the things I think that forges our resilience and even, the potential of some of the mental health struggles when it comes to military and first responders is our early life. Did that affect the home life? Was your father subject to that too?
No, not really. Not that I noticed. If they had their parties. The annoying thing, really, as a young kid, their wedding anniversary was on Christmas Eve. You know what it's like when you go to bed early hoping to get your presents. They always had parties, and people were still there at 3 o'clock in the morning. When you're at the door ready to go and look at your presents. So yeah, that was frustrating. In Germany at the time, it was a very sociable time for my parents. They had lots of friends and they used to come around, but it didn't affect me at all. Certainly didn't overly affect me. But it certainly did do slightly after I joined the military. But I'll come to that in a minute, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I had Mick Southall on a little while ago who went through the junior para program. He found himself in Falklands as well. If I've got that right, I believe he did. I interview so many people, sometimes my stories get mixed up. But it was an amazing insight into the junior para and how these children, are forged into men over the next few years. So walk me through that. What age were you when you were enlisted? And then what did the junior para experience, how did it unfold for you?
Yeah, fantastic. So I was 16 and 2 months, really long hair. In 1976, that was the style. So I had really long hair. So got all that chopped. As soon as I got down there, got that chopped off. The big winged shirts. I had hipster trousers, with the 4 buttons on, flares. I like to write all straight, to be quite frank. But hey, I thought it was pretty cool. Got down there, got it all chopped off. Right. So I have never ever finished a cross country run when I was at school, and the reason being, ball under my arm. All I was interested in was playing football, so never actually participated in the school cross country and athletics. It's just one of them things I wasn't interested in. Got down to junior para, and within about the first 2 weeks, we did a 10-mile run, like a cross country run, I suppose. 10-miler, and the thought of doing 10 miles at that age, and bizarrely I came second, and realised that I was actually a natural runner. and I just wished I'd known that known that before. So I got enlisted, forced into the junior para cross country team. I also joined the gymnastic platoon because the gymnastic platoon travelled all around the country doing demonstrations, including the FA Cup final in 1976, which was Man United and Southampton. So very, very sporty type environment. Funny story, we came second in the regional cross country league. So you used to go to different military units, as in juniors. And we came second. So the Junior Parachute Regiment came second to the Army Catering Corps.
Oh,
So, yeah.
That's not how you think of his smashing physical ability.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, so we, we got our trophies. First trophy ever. And we were heading back to Browning Barracks in Aldershot, and the RSM, the RSM was there to greet us on the bus, and we thought, oh, he's going to say, "Well done, chaps," and all this sort of malarkey. He had a big metal bin with him, and he got on the bus and he went, "If you think coming second to the Army Catering Corps is an achievement, you can think again. Throw your trophies in the bin as you get off a bus." And it was just that mentality. And so I did that for a year, really, up until the age of 17. And basically, junior paras really just teaches you really the basics of being a soldier, marching, but doesn't actually take you the next step of proper soldiering. And you only do that really when you join recruit company. Now, as a junior, so recruit company is the 24-week training that takes you through man service, and then you can go and join your battalions, if that makes sense. So I joined at about week 5 because the juniors have already done a year of learning how to march and stuff like that. So you actually joined at week 5. Because I was like that, skinny as hell, really, really good runner. Got myself through P Company, which I found quite hard because I was quite young, still very immature. I was a 17-year-old youngster, so I found it quite hard going. Managed to get myself through it. About 5 weeks later, we were getting ready to go to a massive military exercise type training thing, which is called Advanced Wales, down in Surrey and unfortunately, just before then, we went for a run, about a 10-mile run again. No medical facility, no ambulance or whatever behind us. It was just a normal run to a place called Hankley Common in Aldershot, and the instructors decided to have a bit of a mess about, and I was on a tank burn. We were all on a tank burn, which was about an 8-foot, 9-foot drop into what we thought was going to be fairly soft mud and sand and all that sort of stuff. And what they wanted us to do is what we perceived as being a para roll. Obviously non-para trained at that time. Off you go, and as I jumped, I just felt a snap, and actually broke my ankle quite badly. So all the rest of the lads a bit annoyed because they had to carry me, carried me back to Browning Barracks to the med centre, and they then sent me up to Cambridge Military, which is a fairly large hospital in Aldershot, literally only about a couple of kilometres away. They manipulated my ankle into place, put it in a cast, and then sort of left it for 2 weeks really. But unfortunately, after 2 weeks, they re-X-rayed it, and then they realised that the ankle hadn't fitted or hadn't knitted together as well as that they hoped. So they decided to pin it. Disappointed, so they pinned it. So that for the next 6 months, it was just getting over that, getting it, a bit of rehabilitation, all that sort of stuff. Only to be called in at the end of that 6 months to be told So the training officer and a medical doctor was there, and they informed me that my life in the parachute regiment was now over because I couldn't parachute. That was their recommendation. You can't parachute anymore. So your options are go and join a normal infantry unit as such, or leave the military. And at that time, because you're indoctrinated into the parachute regiment, I suppose, parachute regiment or nothing. I left a big mistake. I left the army and got out for about 4 months. Totally disappointing, and it was probably the worst decision really that I could have done, because I ended up going back to Lincolnshire. Realised instantly that I was a bit of a bone move really getting out, so reapplied to rejoin, if that makes sense, and was lucky enough that I bumped into that same paratrooper wasn't there. It was someone else now. But he said, "Listen, I've got your medical docs here. It's got a big red thing, no parachuting on there. So why? And although you've got a really good report, obviously a fit lad, have you thought about being a commando?" And at the time, there was only 2 armoured commando units: engineers or the Royal Artillery. And because my father was attached to Royal Artillery, it just stuck in my head. I thought, okay, here we go. I'll join the Royal Artillery. So their basic training was down at Woolwich, just outside London. Went down a bit of a cheat, really, because bear in mind that yes, I'd been out for nearly 5 months, I suppose, but you still had that. You still knew military and all that sort of stuff. Like, that's not gonna. So I ended up getting best shot, best gym, and best recruit, which I thought was a bit of a cheat, really. But they said, listen, it is what it is, and take it and whatever. So took that. Unfortunately, because I wanted to join 2-9 Commando, there was only one space available, and it actually went to a guy who wasn't very fit at all, but his brother was in 2-9 Commando, so he got the place really. So they said, right, options are go and pick another unit, and then you can volunteer and transfer across, but it'll take a few months before you can do that. So I automatically just thought, I'll go to the unit that my father was attached to, because I used to go to school there, blah blah blah. So I went to an organisation called 40 Field Regiment, Royal Artillery, who just happened to be the alcoholic regiment, and they actually sent me to 137 Battery, who happened to be the alcoholic battery of the alcoholic. Honest, the drinking culture was phenomenal. So I arrived at 7 o'clock at night, got into a 4-man room, all the beds empty, purely because they'd all gone straight to the bar. Now over in Germany at the time, the battery bars was underneath the accommodation. So the guys had come from the gun park at say 4 o'clock in the afternoon, still in their coveralls, grimy coveralls, straight down into the bar and drinking alcohol until about midnight or whatever. And that was the daily routine. And then on a weekend, slightly different. They started at 12 and then drank all the way. It's just phenomenal. So I woke up about 3 o'clock in the morning to a sound of dripping water. And the guy opposite me was obviously peeing his bed. I got up at 7, hi guys, I'm the new guy. Went and got a shower, came back, and the guy that had peed his bed was still in his uniform, but he'd reached underneath his bed and literally opened a can of lager and just necked it down. And I just thought, flipping hell, this is hardcore drinking here. I've seriously got to think about doing something. So I literally went off and joined the athletics, football, cross country, tug of war, bizarrely, because the Royal Artillery were very good at tug of war. And it really just got me away and doing something other than getting sucked into a drinking culture, which was very, very easy to do, if that makes sense.
Just to jump in, what do you think it was, knowing that we all kind of finally realize now in 2024 that drinking, like a lot of addictions, is filling a void, something that we're trying to get away from, forget, down regulate, whatever it is. What do you think was the cause of so much anxiety, depression, whatever it was that was causing that to be rife in that particular unit?
Yeah, I think because 40th Regiment at the time had been based in the same camp for 22 years. So I think it just became a natural culture. Unless you were very single-minded to say, right, I'm going to join the cross-country team and just dedicate myself to running it. It was very easy for the normal people, the average soldier, I suppose, especially the youngsters, to go with peer pressure. And peer pressure is, let's go down the battery bar, have a beer, blah blah blah, and away you go. And bear in mind that we had I was only there 8 months, and we had 3 suicides. A guy shot himself in the head. When we do a thing called sight guard over there, where you're actually guarding specific sites of high value, if that makes sense. And you've got these towers, watch towers, and we just heard a shot at night, and a lad had decided to shoot himself through the mouth with an SLR. Took the complete top of his head off. We had a guy jump in front of a lorry on the autobahn, just jumped out in front of it, and it was a shame because he was in the cross country team, not in the cross country, he was in the athletics team. But he was a half caste lad, and apparently we didn't know, but he was getting bullied by in his. It wasn't in our battery; it was in another battery, and he decided enough was enough, so jumped in front. And the other guy was he hung himself in the stores. They couldn't find him, and they found him the next day, and he'd hung himself. And so that was a bit of a culture shock, really, because that's what, 8 months or just less, I suppose, and you've got 3 suicides, and it was just that that heavy, and really it accelerated my plans to get away from there as quick as I can. So I volunteered for every course I could try and do, signals, OPIAC, whatever, all sorts of courses, just to get away from that environment. Anyway, so we were doing cross country. The battery was away doing something, and I managed to put my shit in, and I want to go to 2-9 Commando. They were going to be away for 3 weeks. By the time I got back, I was packing my kit and I was gone. And I got a flight over to Plymouth, ready to do the commando course, and that was my way out. But yeah, Germany at the time was not healthy at all, or it could be very healthy. You could have had a great time in Germany if you were very single-minded and determined not to get sucked into it. But unfortunately, a lot of people do get sucked into it. The people that escape it really are the married people, because they're going back home to their family. But we had a lot of single lads that lived in the block. Quite a few old and bold ones as well. Like they've been in there for many years, and they were the problem. They had this sort of this reach around getting people, and let's go to the bar. It was just an unhealthy drinking culture. But yeah, I managed to stay away from that, thankfully.
I think one of the least discussed elements of the mental health conversation is the multi-generational trauma. And, we've kind of romanticized the World War II generation and not downplaying what they actually did. What they actually did was incredible. But we almost then painted a kind of facade that they just kind of rolled up their sleeves and got on with it and, went back to work, as if that wasn't going to have an immense impact, that you were in Bastogne or, whatever area that you served. And then now I'm doing almost 1,000 interviews you hear about, usually grandpa, sometimes even dad, depending on the age of the guest. And then you realize, oh no, these men and women didn't come back unharmed at all. There was a huge amount of alcoholism and domestic violence. And, and again, it's not judging these people. They had no conversation. No one was talking about this then. When you look at that generation that you're talking about, was there ever any stories of, the parents or conflicts prior that kind of lent to this, epidemic that we're seeing, like dominoes falling at the moment?
Yeah, not really, and I think a lot of it is because I just kept away from it, because it can be quite depressing, and I'm generally not a depressing. I was trying to think that I'm not. I'm actually quite a positive individual. So yeah, so I literally just kept away from the that side of it and the story side of it. My mother and father obviously divorced, so. There was a massive divorce rate in Germany at the time, and the way that went, and it's funny because my father was a very unsupportive individual. Typical military guy, I suppose. But he never once came and saw me play football, which I thought was quite bizarre because you would have thought that your father would be pretty chuffed to bits, like So
I can relate, by the way. I won national championships in martial arts, and my dad never watched me fight
yeah,
once. So I know how it feels.
but yeah, absolutely, it's frustrating, isn't it? Because you look up and you see people, and it'd be nice just to see your parents, like sort of watching. And so because my father wasn't there, my mother wasn't there because she couldn't drive, obviously. So that was, but what that did do is later on in life, when I got married and I had 4 kids, I used to think back, how can I be a better father than what my dad was, if that makes sense. Now,
Absolutely.
my father, he when they divorced, we sort of moved back from Germany at the time to Lincolnshire, and he came to visit me and my brother because my sister was quite young at the time, and he brought 4 cans of beer. Now I was 15 and a bit. Never drunk alcohol in my life. So why he brought 4 cans of beer, expecting to have a chat with the boys, but what it was him. That was him saying goodbye, and he walked out the door, never to be seen again. It was, and I could never do that. If I've got 3 kids and I divorce, then I'm making sure I see the kids. But that was him, and that really, um, yeah, put me off, ever again. So my sister years later tried to track him down, wasn't interested, absolutely, because I just thought if anyone that can walk out of a 15-year-old, a 16-year-old, my brother, and a 7-year-old sister, is not right. So yes, you can track him down. I personally not interested, and I've never seen him since. And unfortunately, he passed away a few years ago. Remarried, and everything else. Good luck to him, I suppose. But as a father, no, not interested. When you walk out of a family, and do it in that fashion, yeah, it had a massive effect on me. That you could do that for to your kids, and it just made me a better father. I'm very, very close. I got divorced, separated after 30 years. Nothing untoward. It was just we drifted apart. So it survived the military, the marriage, when the kids were all young. But as the kids were getting older, and I was in corporate security, but still working away long, 6 weeks on, 2 weeks off, we literally drifted apart. And I would come in having been gallivanting all around the world, and my ex-wife Kim and Keely, my daughter, would be planning a holiday. And as I came in, I was the doggy sitter because we had 4 dogs and 2 cats. And I was just happy to be back home and just chilling. You go off, I'll take you down to the airport, enjoy yourself, come back, blah, blah. So we just found that we were drifting apart, if that makes sense. But we actually get on better now than what we did because we were bickering quite a lot. It was very noticeable for my daughter as well. But we actually get on really well now. We're not together again, and we won't get back together. or I don't think so anyway. But certainly, we actually get, and it's great for the kids. And I'm a big believer that if you ever separate, because you never know, in life always changes, like, but if anyone ever splits up, always make sure it's amicable because of the kids. So when they're planning, birthdays and all this sort of thing, it doesn't put them in a position of, who should we invite? Because they're going to be fighting like cats and dogs. At least for me and Kim, at least we get on quite well. So we've done quite a few joint family visits. We're at a wedding last year all together, if that makes sense. So yeah. But like I say, the way my father was, it had a massive effect on how I looked at my kids. I encouraged them to do as much sport, and karate, getting there, judo, football, rugby, everything that we did. But we didn't push them. It was all to the extent of, as soon as you feel that you're bored, had enough, then fair dues, come on. The only thing we were persistent with was a musical instrument. So they all picked their instrument, what they wanted to learn. And that's the only thing really that they had to continue with up until senior school, when they can make their own decision, if that makes sense. But everything else, it was, do it for as long as you feel you're happy with doing it. And then when you feel that you're not happy with doing it, then go and do something else, because that's what kids are like. They can plan, they can do it as much as they want, like, but without being forced into it.
When I speak to a lot of the people who are athletes when they were younger and the coaches, the multi-sport athlete is usually the most resilient and the most successful. So this idea, especially in America, where you got your kid playing baseball and throwing pitches at 3 years old, and every summer they're doing travel ball and sports camps, and then they wonder why their shoulder explodes at 17 years old. It's because of that. And I have the same philosophy. Both of what you've said. My dad was, let's just say he wasn't there, in many ways, and there was an element of straying as well. So I could have gone one of two ways. I think this is what's beautiful about a husband, a wife, a father, a mother, is you get to choose. Do you follow that same level of trauma, that same path? Well, my dad was an alcoholic, my granddad was an alcoholic, I'm destined to be one. Or do you say, I'm going to do the complete opposite? And I've made sure that apart from being on shift as a firefighter, that I was there for every single one of my games, my son's games. And he played, he's played at a high level in school as far as varsity, and he's played in just little, local pickup football, leagues. And I've always been there, because when he scores a goal or when he saves a goal or whatever it is, I want to be there when he turns around with that big smile on the face, same as you did when you scored a goal, or I did when I won a fight and turned to the stands and all I saw were my friends' parents. So I think it's beautiful that you were able to take the higher ground and say, I'm going to learn from my father what not to do rather than the other way.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I found that I was quite fortunate having 4 kids in the military. I was actually there for all their births, which is extremely unusual. So my oldest was born in Plymouth when I was an instructor on the All Arms Commander course, and literally he was 4 days old when I went on SAS selection. So the next time I saw him, he was 6 months old, which is a bit bizarre. Now, trying to explain to people that when you do things like SAS selection, you've got to be completely single-minded, and everything else is blocked out the way. But for me, it was worth blocking out the family. So my new wife, we'd only been married about 18 months, and then having a young son of 4 days old. Selfish, yeah, but I was looking at the end game. We were going to be improving our lifestyle and everything by passing this course, and off we went. And quite bizarrely, we were in the jungle. So the hardest part of SAS selection is obviously the jungle phase, because you're in canopy, and it can be quite intimidating, and you've got to be you've got to be completely focused on what you're doing. It can be a very dangerous environment if you're having thoughts of anything else. And this lad came up to me one day and started asking about my son, because he's got he had a young son as well. So when I found out, and he just wanted a conversation about and to be honest, I got rid of him. I was short shrift. Sorry, mate, but not interested, like, you know. So really just fobbed him off there and then, because I didn't want to start dwelling on family when we're there to pass SES selection. And the next day, this lad had decided to bin it and canned it, and I think the talk really was possibly a cry for help, I suppose, just to. But what I didn't want to do is end up, being the person that his shoulders on, or a shoulder to cry on, because it would have me thinking about family, and that could have devastating effects really on your ability to do the job in hand, because some of the stuff you do in the jungle very, very dangerous, and you've got to be completely focused on what you're doing. And certainly, marriage, young 4-day-old son is massively put in the back, and that takes a lot of selfishness, I would say, but also discipline as well. You've got a job to do. Let's get on with it, like, and quite bizarre. And then again with the three other the three other kids, two other sons. I very, very fortunate that I just happened to be either in Hereford, and my daughter, when she was born, I was actually attached to MI5 in London, and we had the bleepers them days, rather than mobile phone, a bleeper, and the message came through on the bleeper. Come home, I'm in labour. So I kept the message because I was hammering at about 130 mile an hour down the M4.
So you could show the officer.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I was going to get pinged, you just say, listen, and bizarrely, I had a rear left blowout of the vehicle at 130 odd mile an hour, and this is why, and it was a Toyota, but the vehicle never came offline. A big bang, sort of drifting over. Managed to quickly change it. Did it slow us down? No. I needed to get back, and literally stormed into the house, expecting a new baby. And my ex-wife was stood there, and she went, "Oh," and I went, "What's going on?" And she went, "Oh, I'm it's coming, but anyway, go upstairs, have a shower. I'll make you some tea." And literally within 10 minutes, really, of me going up, having a quick shower, she started screaming. Call the midwife. We sent the three boys out to go and play football, as you do. And literally half an hour later, my daughter was born, and thankfully the midwife let me cut the cord, which is great. Yeah, so 4 fantastic kids, love it. They're just awesome dudes, if that makes sense. And they keep you. I find with kids that they keep you very grounded. You can be off in Northern Ireland doing some stuff over there. You come back, and next minute you're picking the kids up. So it gives you that sense of normality. Whereas single blokes maybe they come back from Ireland or whatever, and then go back to the block or go back to an empty house, and they could dwell on what they've actually done. Whereas when you've got 4 or 3 boys at the time jumping all over your head, and it was good grounding. You know what I mean? And it just kept you level-headed and normal, and you just didn't. So I'm really fortunate that, having done quite a lot in my military career, I suppose, and afterwards, done some quite dodgy stuff thereafter. But I sleep easy at night, and thankful for that. And a lot of that is because I had a stable marriage and great kids around you. And I always say that if you've got a really good family to come back to at night time, you can sort of get away from get the ghosts away and just concentrate on the good side of stuff, if that makes sense. So never ever suffered, post traumatic stress, none of that. But a lot of that is family, having a really cool family to get you through them dark moments, I suppose.
It's funny when you were talking about that. I'd never really thought of it this way, but when, as firefighter paramedics in America, we see everyone's worst day. No one's calling saying, "Hey, I'm having a great day. I just wanted to check in with you." It can be, their worst day might be as something as silly, which I have run on. My dentures don't taste right, which is obviously a psychological issue, all the way through to these horrific car crashes and fatal fires and all the things that we respond to. But when you go home, not only do you get, hopefully, if you live in a somewhat decent area, you get a taste of the rest of the world, because we're seeing this little slice, these emergent calls that most people only experience maybe a handful of times in their entire existence. But also it's proactive. In my job, it's very reactive. It's already gone horribly wrong. Now we have to go and unfuck it, basically, for lack of a better word. But then when you go home, you have an opportunity to raise kind, compassionate, considerate children that hopefully will be the opposite, especially if we're responding to crimes, and gangs and homelessness and addiction and sex workers and all the things where people have found themselves desperate. You have an opportunity to move the balance the other way. So I think that's also a healing element when you come back, whether it's a shift as a firefighter or a deployment at war.
Yeah, absolutely. I tell you what, but funny old thing, but when we actually separated, we lived in quite a large 5-bed barn conversion right out in the country. Fantastic. I actually thought that was our forever home, but situations changes and all this sort of thing. So when we were sort of talking about divvying things up as you do, I actually gave the whole house to my ex-wife, to Kim, and the reason being is 4 fantastic kids. She deserved it. She absolutely 100% deserved it, because when I was in the military, she was always there for the kids. When I'd left the military and I started working away again, even more so than when I was in the military, she was always there for the kids, and the way the kids have been brought up really is testament to her, as opposed to me. I'm a father and this, that, and the other, but the discipline, the manners, the way they are, is all through her. And I just thought, who am I to be, a total prat and a bit of an a-hole to start taking things away and stuff like that. So, and because my daughter was still living with my ex-wife, also in the back of my mind, I thought, at least my daughter's, she's going to be catered for. Solicitor thought I was mad as a hatter. What the hell? What are you doing? But at the time, I was living in hotels in Monaco for 3 years. Not ideal, but it meant that I didn't really need the house, if that makes sense. So, gave it to Kim. Unfortunately, she's sold it. I was a bit gutted about that, but she sold it because her and my daughter run a little business in Hereford, and they obviously wanted to be a bit closer, because we used to be about 14 miles outside of Hereford. So they actually sold the house, went mortgage free, and brought a nice little house in Hereford itself, So good on them, but I didn't. What I didn't want is money issues getting in the way of my relationship with the kids, which I thought was quite important. And it's very easy to do. People get this thing of money, and it can ruin completely wreck a relationship, even with your kids, if that makes sense. If you're that way orientated, and I just didn't want to do that. I was quite content, and there you go. You take the house. And like I say, she absolutely deserved it. I married her when she was 19. Dragged her away from Scotland, which is where she lived. Dragged her all the way down to Plymouth initially. while I was on the All Arms Commander course. Then moved her up to Hereford. She had three kiddies, 3 young boys, all under the age of 3. You imagine how, and when you've not got family around you, all her family are up in Scotland. She was pretty hardcore. Fantastic mum, and I just, every now and then I had to have a chat with the kids. When sometimes kids get a bit of a moody on with a mum or dad or whatever. But when they have a moody on with the mum, I always remind them that, listen, when you were growing up, who was always there for you? Your mum. So go around now and apologise and suck it up, and just get on with it. And yeah, so it's being gracious really and humble about what wives go through. Because people always go on about the military, military guys, blah 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 blah, and all this, bangs. But actually, the wives, because they're living that, the worry. Quite bizarrely, one of my sons, all my 3 sons are in the military. One of them deployed to Afghanistan a few years ago, and my ex-wife Kim was absolutely distraught. And I looked at her and went, "Hold on. When I used to go to Bosnia and undercover in Ireland and all that sort of thing, you never used to cry like that." and she, quite rightly so, she went, "Yeah, but you're my husband. These are my kids. These are my babies, And she's right. They say it slightly different. So yeah, I lot of time for the forces wives, purely because they do really put up with a lot for very little reward, I suppose. So who was I to take half of a house and make her struggle? That's not within my nature, if that makes sense. So.
It does. Well, speaking of sending children to war, let's go back to the Falklands. So you've become a commander. You've still got a pin in your foot. Firstly, I've had, let me see, I had John Geddes, or John Graham, I think was his pen name, Philip Neame, Mick Southall on the show, all that were deployed in various roles. And one of the things I think that's the least discussed was the heroism of some of the civilian vessels that transported you guys down. Did you go on the Canberra to the Falklands, or was it a different vessel?
No, so I came back on the Canberra when it had all finished. We actually started off on an LSL landing ship auxiliary called the Sir Percival. So flat bottom vessel. And attached to the port side of the vessel. I don't know why I've got my right hand up. So on the port side of the vessel was a massive Mexi float or a raft, the big metal thing, and it just banged. So all the way down there, you got this flipping banging of this big metal thing on a flat bottom vessel. When we got into the Bay of Biscay, everyone was violently sick. So we were on that ready all the way down to Ascension Island. And then just after the Ascension Island, all the vessels stopped on Ascension, really. And it was a great way, really, of getting off, because on a vessel you have to wear soft shoes, trainers, or desert wellies, or whatever, flip-flops. But it was a great way of getting onto a volcanic island and doing a 10-mile run in your boots again, and just to get the cobwebs out, I suppose. But your feet were just completely soft, so you'd actually mashed them up with blisters and everything else by the time you finished. Now we did one because we were attached to 4-5 Commando. So we did a 10-mile yomp, as they call it, around the island. And then 2 days later, 3 Para decided that they were going to do their chab around there. And they wanted to work with OP parties, Royal Artillery OP parties, to test the communication, really, and doing a bit of, how we would operate together if we were ever together. So some bright spark volunteered us to do another one. So we did another 10 mile. Bearing in mind that we're blistered feet by this time, but because you're wearing a green hat and you're with paras, you didn't let that show, and off you went and did it. But it was good because it like I say, it just got the cobwebs out, ready for. And then we really cross-decked over to a vessel called the Stromness, which was a military vessel, but it was a more of a logistics type vessel, called the Stromness. Quite a big old thing. And it's where 4-5 Commando were. So we, as OP, because we were artillery OPs, we were going to be attached to them. When I say artillery, I've never been on the guns in my life. So they're down one end, I'm at the other end with 4-5 Commando directing the gunfire and all that sort of stuff, if that makes sense. So we had 3-4-man teams that were, and we were attached to a company called Yankee Company, and it was great because our camp in Arbroath, Scotland, was 4-5 Commando. So the people that you're actually going to war with, you actually know through going to Norway for years and know them drinking alcohol in town or whatever, socialising, which is great. Whereas the other two batteries that we had, they were working with units and they were separated, so they didn't really have that close bond. So it was funny story. So when we landed, when we were due to go on shore, so you got all the Marines in a little landing craft now. We got on and we somehow ended up at the front, where the where the ramp was, and we were looking around going, hold on, how come we're at the front here, but you just suck it up and get on with it, and they made us carry 4 mortar bombs. So obviously you're berging 4 mortar bombs, and it was just a quick way really of getting mortars or mortar bombs onto the beach, if that makes sense. So the ramp went down. Thankfully, it was an unopposed landing. We got off, stack it off with all your kit. It's quite heavy. Drop the mortar bombs down on the beach, and there was a nice big pile of it. And then just moved up into the high ground. So it was, and really up until about 3 or 4 days before that, we actually thought that they'd come up with some sort of peace settlement and it'd be all a waste of time. But literally the night before, when you're getting all cammed up and you're starting to get all your orders and you're good to go, that's when you realise, this is it. Okay, let's go for it, And but it's what all kids, anyone that joins the military, that's what you've always wanted to do, So it's time to get on with it, So it was good. It's thoroughly enjoyed it, if that makes sense. But I think a couple of days into it, when so the initial part was just forming a beachhead, as they call it. So get all the troops into the high ground. We saw a lot of damage. So we had a ship called the Antelope, which is a little a frigate that got bombed and it blew up. There was a bomb that didn't go off. A very brave individual went on there to try and defuse it. It went off. He got killed. A few others. But the sad sight of it, really, breaking its back, and literally, it was about 2 kilometres out in the Sound, directly in front of us. So quite a poignant night, really, knowing that a vessel has just sunk directly in front of you, So again, that had the effect of being very determined about what we needed to do, if that makes sense. So and then we did the breakout. So 4-5 Commando was the unit that carried all their kit basically, and we did the Yompa Cross, as they call it, or Chab, on the way over. And we literally chabbed all the way stopped off in 2 settlements, Teal Inlet, a place called Teal Inlet and Douglas, just to spend the night there, I suppose, and then move on, with the objective being to get to a place called Mount Kent, which was quite a high feature, sort of a fair way outside. So I would say 2/3 of the way to Stanley, and we. The good thing about Mount Kent is you can see all the high ground, or all the high features that were going to be our next objective, if that makes sense. But while we was on Mount Kent, my ankle flared up somewhat, because 6 months before the Falklands, I'd actually been down to, I'd been for a run, and my ankle was really, really sore. So the medical doctor at Arbroath decided that, yeah, it's probably, you probably need to get your pin out, because it should have come out after 18 months. But being a numpty, when I left the army, I totally forgot about it. And so when they tried to get the pin out, they couldn't get it out, so they buried it deeper. But the tissue hadn't really knitted. So because your feet are soaking wet on the Falklands, it's peat bog, so soaking wet all the time. The ankle started to get really infected, and a bit gammy and everything else. So when we got to Mount Kent, all the rear echelon units from 4-5 Commando were catching up, and someone suggested that I go down and get it wrapped up and get it cleaned out and everything else. So nipped down there really, and this doctor examined it, again, military doctor, bane of my life. He decided that he was going to evacuate me and send me back to the ship, hospital ship called the Uganda. And I just looked at him and thought, hold on, I've just I've just walked all that way here just before the battles, and you want to say, yeah, okay. So anyway, so he strapped up, and he said, right, well, why don't you, he gave me a load of antibiotics, and then said, listen, what I want you to do is go back now, grab your kit, and then come back down. Yeah, no problems. Yeah, fat chance that was going to happen. So off I went to, so got back to my position on Mount Kent. The next day, we actually adjusted all the artillery pieces onto a mountain called Two Sisters, and bizarrely, we adjusted so 3 batteries all at once is called a fire mission regiment. So we called a fire mission regiment, adjusted the guns so when we did the attack, you just had numbers that you read out the number, and the guns automatically fired onto that target, if that makes sense. So it's all pre-planning your artillery stuff and all that lot. So we did that, and the CO came up on the radio and went, "Oh, do you realise that's the first fire mission regiment in anger since the Korean War?" Bizarrely, and we adjusted it So, but the next day, this doctor tracked me down, and give me a right hard time. Refused his order, blah 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 blah. Thankfully, there was a major from our unit who was stood behind me, and he sided with me and said, listen, Hawksley feels happy enough, so he's going to crack on. So, thanks for your advice, but bog off. And my thinking was, you've walked all that way, you've got 3 other colleagues, so me going sick now is going to leave a massive burden for them, if that makes sense. Bear in mind that you're now going into battle, what every kid wants to do when they join the military. So for me, going off to the Uganda was not even an option. So yes, I refused it. And right decision, yeah, absolutely. Because when I got on the Canberra at the end of it all, I ended up 10 days in the sick bay on antibiotics and everything else, because the ankle was completely manky and all that sort of stuff. Would I change that? No, not at all. Because ultimately we were there to do a job, and a little gammy ankle. If you're going to go sick, then make sure your arm's been blown off, or you've lost a leg, and then go sick. But certainly not a gammy ankle that you can strap up, take a few tablets, paracetamol, get on with it. That sort of mentality, and that's what we did really. And it was good because the battles went 4-5 Commando lost 4 people. We were on the and this is where I got the mindset ready that I was going to go special forces. We were getting mortared on the start line for the attack on 4-5 on Two Sisters. But when you're being mortared on the start line, there is nothing you can do about it. And literally, you just got to sit there and just hope that mortar that's coming in, it hasn't got your name on it. And to be honest, it was flipping freezing. So my thinking was, well, I might as well get my head down because I don't know when when's the next time I'm going to be able to sleep. Well, I don't know. So my thinking really was, sod it, just get my head down, and then when we're good to go, at least I've had an hour or two sleep, if that makes sense. So
if you haven't been blown up by a mortar.
But everyone's sort of sat huddled and and there's you sort of snoring away, get your head down, but it was that that mentality that it is what it is. So it's not a drama. It can be a drama. If a mortar hits you, then there's not a lot you're gonna there's not a lot you're gonna worry about, but certainly let's get on with it. So that really set the tone really for when we did the attack, which went really well. Bear in mind that the 4-5 commando had lost all their mortars. Unfortunately, they had a bit of an incident where they actually lost people before the attacks, so they didn't have any mortars at all. So they're very reliant on artillery ourselves, and also a naval vessel called either Glamorgan, I think it was, who actually, fantastic, they actually stayed online a bit too long, supporting 4-5 commando, a bit too long. And then when daybreak came up, they should have been gone, but they weren't, and they got picked up by a ground crew exocet who fired and killed a few people on it. But to be honest, what a brave decision by the captain to stay on station while 4-5 commando were still trying to take these two sort of major features which made up really Two Sisters, along with our artillery and stuff like that. So so at the end of it, at the end of that phase, it was all finished. We then started getting bombarded with 155, which is a hell of a large artillery piece really, but it wasn't accurate fire. So when it came in close, it was scary. But because they were firing, they had 3 155 guns, and instead of having them all together and firing them together, which would have been a hell of a scary experience to be at the bottom of that, they were using one at a time and just firing indiscriminately. They obviously had OPs, observation posts, seeing and trying to hit targets. But it was one of them hit and miss, a bit like the mortars. If your name's on it, you're going to get it. If not, then try not to worry about it, and then really it was the planning for the final phase, and literally our final phase really was to take a place called Sapper Hill. And if this had gone ahead, without a shadow of doubt, we would have lost quite a few people, because it was very flat, open through minefields, very open, nowhere ready to. So we were having to tell 4-5 commando, the blokes themselves, listen, we can't support you as much as you want, because we need to retain a lot of the ammunition ready for the next phase, if that makes sense. Because what they were doing was they were using the artillery as if it was mortars. So any close in sort of fire support, they were saying, listen, can you hit that machine gun with artillery? And you have to say, listen, mate, go and use your 66s or your 84 millimeters and take it out, because we certainly can't. And quite bizarrely, we didn't actually use our own guns on Two Sisters because of the trajectory of the mountain. We had to use a battery called 8 battery. And I tell you what, I tip my hat off to them guys, because the gunnery skills that they provided for that whole duration of the attack, which was a day and a half really, including nighttime, was just phenomenal. Not a single round out of place, danger close. Just about nearly all all the fire missions that we did were danger close. Not the way you do it in a school, the School of Artillery. You have sod that. Let's just get the round and just tell the Marines, listen, guys, keep your heads down because in about 20 seconds, 6 rounds are going to come down fairly close to you. If I may, and that's how we played it. It was all done, off the cuff. Just get on with it type scenario, But the Marines came up at the end. Very grateful, really, for the artillery support. Got ready for the next one, and then obviously the word got round that they'd surrendered. And thankfully, so we ended up on Sapper Hill, and I'm just grateful that we weren't fighting to get there because it would have been touch and go, I would say, for quite a few people. But then it all sort of finished really quick, and next minute we're on the Canberra heading back, and obviously I went to the sick bay. They couldn't believe the state of the ankle, so everybody sort of drinking, celebrating, blah blah blah, and I'm sat in the hospital. Thankfully, I had a television, so I happened to watch the Football World Cup had started, and bizarrely, one of the first games that was on was Argentina because they were the defending champions, and I remember it really well. But they played Belgium in their very first game and lost. So not only lost the Falklands, but lost the first game in the. So it was good. So would I have changed it because of my ankle? No, not at all. It's we did what we set out to do. Quite happy with it. Ankle, it was in a bit of a mess, but I was now going to get 6 weeks R&R, so plenty of time really to recover. And bear in mind that on the Uganda, you're getting proper people that are being hurt seriously, been shot, been blown up, lost limbs, and all that sort of things. So me turning up with a gammy ankle, no, sorry, but that's just not the. That's not the way, in my mind, how you come out of a battle, if that makes sense. You come out of a battle because you literally can't move, or something seriously wrong. You can still drag yourself around with a gammy ankle.
Talk to me about the civilians, for example, on the camera that went into war, because I think this is another two things that seem to be under discussed. Firstly, I think the British people, when I was, God, how old was I then? I think 8 when you guys went to war. So it was initially this, heroic thing, but then it'd be like, oh, but they were up against a bunch of, Argentinian farm boys, and it was downplaying the enemy. And then you hear the real, soldiers and Marines that I had on the show. And it's like, yeah, there was an element of that, but there were also Argentinian special forces on there. I mean, there was a whole spectrum. But I think one of the most powerful things, aside from what you and your fellow, military members did in uniform, was the heroism of some of these people that were cruise, entertainers like Wendy that I've heard a few times. So just talk to me about that before we transition to the special forces.
Yeah, I mean, bear in mind that military guys, you volunteer to go into combat. These people were seconded. Even on the LSLs, we had a lot of Chinese not Chinese, but Hong Kong people that were worked in the canteen and the laundry and all that sort of thing. So really, expectations for them wasn't that they should be going to war, but they did, and they always with a big smile. And I think I think because you've got all the military around you, it was for them. It was we're not going to let the military down, which is quite a bizarre thing. Like when we went over to the Canberra when it was at Ascension Island, really to go and drink some alcohol. So we sort of stuck ourselves on there and locked ourselves in a bar, just because it's the first time we'd had proper drink, if that makes sense. But the people were, all the staff and that lot were just fantastic, and the same as coming back, because I was in the hospital, they just couldn't do enough for you. Even to the extent that I was on antibiotics, and a couple of lads came in and brought in a couple of bottles of beer or a couple of cans of beer, and the nurse was there, and crack on, like all we'll do is we'll double your dose.
Counteract.
It was honest. It was, for military, it's slightly different because that's what you're there for. You volunteer, but when you're seconded, that's a whole different ball game. Like but nobody. There was no negativity at all. It was, it was just that culture, I think, and it was all part of history, I suppose. We're off down there. We're all Maggie's sort of troops, like and everything else, and we're off to get our island back, like So, yeah, no, my hat goes off, really. Anyone that's seconded to go to a war, good effort. Different from military. And you're right about the Argentinians. I did a podcast with an Argentinian major talking about it, and no animosity at all. Because we're soldiers. Soldier to soldier. And we were both there to do the same thing. He was there to try and defend what he thought was his island. We were there to retake what we now know is our island. So at the end of it, no animosity. I love the Argentinians to bits. Hate them when they play football. Fantastic rugby team and everything else. But personally, no, absolutely no animosity to the Argentinian, especially the military. These people, especially the pilots, extremely brave individuals. Guys, the young lads on the ground, some of them conscripts, were more really about surviving the cold weather as opposed to fighting. But I tell you what, they didn't capitulate. They fought up to the last bit, really, and it was only until they realised that they were going to be overrun did they actually bug out, and as most people would do, So yeah, hat off to them. Civilians, Argentinians, yeah, no issues with them at all.
Beautiful. Well, when I think of that conflict and I think of Salisbury Plain and, like you said, Wales and some of these training areas that you worked on before, you can see how that was a kind of apples to apples and probably prepared you very well, all the long hikes, etc. Now you're in the special forces, role, and you're deploying in the Middle East. Very different, topography and culture and everything. So what was the contrast between conflict on the Falkland Islands and then this high tier 1 unit that you're with now in a completely different part of the world?
Yeah, different world. And a lot of it is the assets that you have available, the intelligence that you have available, the equipment that you have available, and also you're working with class individuals, people that put them through the rigors of a course and got them. So you're talking top individuals who you're fighting with, on the side of. So yeah, slightly different. But in a way, I joined Special Forces, I suppose, because I wanted to see out the rest of my career. Getting stuck in and not being in the camp. I was never a very good camp soldier. Some of the lads will probably remind me of the fact when I was up in Arbroath, always used to get picked up because my berry wasn't properly, my cap badge wasn't around by my eye. It was more around the ear. My lightweight trousers were always slightly different colour to everyone else's, and yeah, just that camp soldiering thing, it wasn't for me. So it was obvious that the best way around that really is to move on, and which is what we did. But yeah, I found Special Forces slightly different. I was quite unlucky, really. The very first campaign, I suppose, was the first Gulf War, but I was in a squadron that should never have been there. I was in B Squadron, so they had the 3 patrols that went out, Bravo 10, 20, 30. But actually, B Squadron should never have been in theatre. We'd just been on the anti-terrorist team in Hereford. G Squadron, bizarrely, who were going to be taken over from B Squadron. G Squadron were in the Middle East doing all the build-up, really, and we're good to go. You know what I mean? They're fully equipped and everything else. And then end of or mid-December, I think it was, we swapped over. And then suddenly G Squadron were on the anti-terrorist team, and B Squadron, no no equipment, blah blah blah. So I suppose I was fortunate. Me and 7 other guys got sent up to the UAE on a training task, really, and it was to keep favour with the UAE government. So we were doing bodyguard training for their special forces, and it really it was more of a thank you to the UAE government for letting us use their assets, their airports, and all that sort of stuff for the move up into Saudi Arabia and everything else. So just before the ground war started, we automatically assumed that when the war was going to start, we would move up as an 8-man patrol and join one of the squadrons up there, or B squadron, because they're trying to find a job. But the 2 squadrons that were deployed were A and D. They had all the assets, all the equipment, and off they went, and blah blah blah. But then the day before the air war started, the CO of 2-2 came up and said, "Listen, guys, apologies, but you're going to be staying here. You're going to be watching the whole war on TV, CNN, because we need you to stay here to keep the face ready with the UAE government as a thank you. You can't really just say, right, sorry guys, but we're off now, and leave a course half finished." So that was a bit galling to be told that. If that makes, but at least we knew we had a job, and it was, we knew what we were doing. But it was galling watching everything pan out on CNN on a thing like, so the boys are getting shot up, and we're losing people here, and we're sat in the UAE in the officers' mess, sort of watching it on a television, like, so galling, yeah. But to be honest, B Squadron, should we have been in theatre? No. It should have been. What really should have happened, by right common sense, should have applied. B Squadron should have stayed on the anti-terrorist team and done another 6-month rotation, and G Squadron, because they're fully equipped, they've done all the training, they've done all the, they can deploy with the other 2 squadrons. That should have happened, but it didn't. So unfortunately, B were just hunting, looking for jobs, which I didn't really agree with. But thankfully, we were sent up, and we were doing a training task up in the UAE. Came back from that really, and bear in mind that we'd lost a few people. So that was a grim thing, really. Coming back and having to bury some of the, and I carried the coffin of a young lad called Bob Consiglio, who's an ex-Royal Marine, literally only been in the squadron about a year. And then we had then the Gulf War started, and unfortunately he was killed, rest in peace, in part of Bravo 2's era. So carrying the coffins, really, and it was a sad day because it was 3 coffins. Legs Lane was another one, rest in peace, and Vince Phillips, again, rest in peace. And just heartbreaking, really. It's the first time, really, I've actually welled up. But when we had the coffins and we were about to leave the church, I think it was one of Vince's youngsters cried out, "Daddy!" And you could see, because we were the rear coffin, you could just see all the coffins sort of moving, jerking, where people were sort of, we're all, hardcore individuals, but when you hear that, yeah, sad day, really. Quite bizarrely, so it was St Martin's Church, and there's a main road directly opposite as you come out the main doors into the open. There was a main road, and the press decided to turn up. So you had, Sun newspaper and all the other half-wits sort of rocked up. And then what they did was they decided to put they built a little platform for them on the other side of the road, on the pavement, just so that they can stand up there and take pictures. And on cue, the SAS had organised a articulated truck to break down directly in front of the doors, if that makes sense, so that it just blocked as we came out. So I think one of the Sun, because we were on the front page of the Sun, but they sprinted round. Obviously, they sussed out what was going on. But by then, the two front coffins had already gone round the side, and we were the last coffin. So they managed to get a quick picture, just of the back end of us, if that makes sense. And thankfully, no facial pictures, like, because that was on the front page of the Sun the next day, like, which was quite annoying. But yeah, I just thought a bit of lateral thinking there by the regiment.
That's brilliant.
But dropping the coffins in, yeah, sad day to lose colleagues, especially colleagues that have only been in a year, or a year, and Legsy was on my selection. Vince, been in quite a few years, really good lad, really well liked and everything else, and yeah, it just seemed a total waste, really, if that makes sense. But realities of being in the SES, I suppose, and the next day you just get on with whatever you need to do. There's quite bizarrely, Bob Consiglio was Royal Marine, and in them days, if you was a Royal Marine transferring to the SES, you had to literally leave the Marines, and then you had to be administered by the parachute regiment while you did selection. And so on the coffin lid, it had Bob Consiglio Parachute Regiment, and he wasn't Parachute Regiment; he was Royal Marines. And thankfully, there was a lot of Royal Marines turned up at the funeral, and one of them took his berry off and dropped it perfectly on top of that plaque. So we had a green berry on it. And then a few of the other lads did exactly the same. They took which I thought was a really nice touch by the Marines, like, if that makes sense, and a complete arse cock up, really, by the regiment, having this plaque on there, parachute regiment. He wasn't. He was Royal Marines, like, So good on the booties for doing that for Bob, like, if that makes sense. So yeah, sad time, but it is what it is, and then you crack on, and really, and our next sort of major conflict, no, for me anyway, was doing all the undercover stuff over in Northern Ireland.
Before we jump into that, I just want to kind of hit a tangent for a moment. When I look at, and I'm now looking through, American eyes, obviously I've been here for 22 years now. I look at, for example, the drug companies, and you look at America, and as we sit here now, America is 70% obese or overweight. And then sadly, when I go home, I see the UK is trying to catch them up. It's heartbreaking. But, unlike the US, the UK still is hanging on to the NHS, which I think is an incredible system, but you've got to support it properly and fund it and get behind it and keep Britons healthy so they don't use it very much. But over here, there's no checks and balances, and we have a profit-based healthcare system. So really, it's promoting ill health. It's legalized drug dealing, basically, is what it is. The fatter and sicker people are, the more money these companies make. And don't get me wrong, I was a paramedic for years. There's some great drugs that save lives, anesthesias, all these things that we need. But chronic disease management has been abused horrendously. It's the same with war. When you have people who make uniforms and MREs and missiles and planes and all the things, there's obviously a pull from some lobbyists to say, well, let's keep in conflicts. I'm making a lot of money when we're at war. But that's at the expense of the very men that you just talked about. And of course, there are times where we cannot turn our back. I mean, World War II is obviously going to be a great example of that. What is your perspective of that, checks and balances, to ensure that we only go to war when we absolutely have to and all diplomacy has failed?
Yeah, that's it's a difficult one, especially being in special forces, if that makes sense, because you're there ready to do what you have to do. You too. So when you're in this special forces sort of sphere of things, you don't really question, although morally, you sort of think, yeah, okay, but generally, if there's a job to do, you just get on and get on with it, like, and try not to get involved in the the politics side of it. Slightly different now that you're out, because you can be a bit more forthright. But while you're serving, slightly different. And bizarrely, people always assume that the SES are the cutthroat, the assassins of the government and stuff like that, which is actually a false narrative, really, because guys will question, and if people think that it's the wrong thing to do, then they won't carry it out. They'll push it up the chain and say, listen, this is bone. It's not feasible, or let's think about doing it another way. And that's what I found out about the SES very quickly, is that it's not like the normal military where you just follow a structure and the officer says this, and this is the way we're doing it. We don't. The SES don't. We sit down, and it's like having a Chinese parliament. And the reason being is the selection process brings up some massive amount of experience, if that makes sense. And you've got guys that maybe have done 10 years doing a certain job, and we're about to having to use that asset really, and mindset to do this job. And he's only been in the regiment 10 minutes, and right, John, what do you think? You're a tanky, give us your opinion. How should we go about it? It's great. It's just a really mature attitude of having, as opposed to being the old TikTok. This is how we're doing it. Light abreast. Let's go for it type thing. It's actually quite refreshing, and it's one of the reasons why people volunteered to go there in the first place. It's a very mature attitude. But believe you me, if guys certainly feel that that is not the right thing to do, then they won't do it. They'll do it in a certain other way, and they'll actually tell the bosses, "Listen, we ain't doing it that way. We're going to do it this way," if that makes sense. So it's not the stereotype cutthroat, do this and blah, blah. It's not like that at all.
You used the phrase camp soldier earlier, which I can totally relate to, because I never understood how I could be, up to my elbows in blood in some horrible wreck or fighting fire, and then they turn around and tell me that I got to wear my shiny uniform and shiny shoes. Like, those two just don't go hand in hand. Yes, when we're going to do some publicity event or a promotion event, and I get it. More often than not, sadly, I wore all the fancy clothes in funerals, and I fucking can't stand bagpipes to this day because there's so many of them. But but it's you do a job for a while, and then I think some people just are able to step back and go, why are we doing this way? And there's numerous examples, but then you become a disruptor. And so I can see the attraction to the special forces. Not saying that I'm a tier 1 level firefighter, but just the way I think after a while, as if you're not able to make a difference within, then you have to be outside and you have to disrupt and shake the tree. So I think that's great. But I think that where change also comes is when people have humility. And you used a beautiful example there. Someone's been in the unit for a month, but they've got 10 years working in tank division or whatever it is. That's a humility to say, you've just got here, but we respect your skill set. Where there's a lot of arrogance and ego in the fire services, like, we don't want to hear where you came from, shut up, this is the way we do it. And that only adds to the machine. Having the humility to say, oh, you were a builder, and we've got this unusual roof that we got to cut in the middle of this fire. I want to know, what is this roof safe to go on? Where should I cut? These are things I think that's maturity. I think humility comes from maturity, and arrogance is actually immaturity.
Yeah, absolutely. We work very well with Delta over in the States, if that makes sense. Purely because Delta is actually based on SES, not the other way around. SES is based on.
I make sure people know that too.
Yeah, and very much aligned, very much the same mindset. And someone always said to me, "Who is the best tier 1 unit in the world?" Without a shadow of doubt, SES. And I don't say that lightly, but I say that is because of the diversity of the roles that we have to do, which unfortunately Delta don't. Delta don't do the anti-terrorist team, for instance. We do, and other bits and bobs. And the other question that keeps coming up about Delta and SEAL Team 6, for instance, for me, Delta every time, and the reason being is they're like us. They are military people through and through before they even think about doing Delta. You know, these are seasoned veterans from the airborne, from the Green Beret, special, all that type of area. So, hardcore individuals before they even think about doing the Delta course. And it's exactly the same as the regiment, So I think the top tier two, obviously for us, we've got the SBS as well, which are very akin to the SES because we do a joint selection. But without a shadow of doubt, SES tier one, and I think if you were hand on heart, if you were to ask Delta and SEAL Team 6, they would, they would hate to say it, but just the diversity of the role. And just to give you an example, so anti-terrorist team, 6 months, come off that, go to Northern Ireland, grow your hair nice and long, 2 years undercover, come back from that, shave your hair off, straight over to Bosnia, do something over there, come back from there, go and join MI5 for 2 years. Massive dive, in that little cycle. Other tier one units don't do that. So for me, yeah, SES right up there.
I gotta say, I don't know if you know who Captain Dale Dye is. He's a Marine that got into the films, and so he taught the cast of Saving Private Ryan, Band of Brothers, Platoon, and I did stunts the whole time I was a firefighter. So I got my side gig, and I worked on a stunt show in Japan before I moved to the US. And we were sitting after a kind of mini boot camp that he gave us for the same reason, to train actors. And we were asking him, just a bunch of questions about his service, and I forget how it came up, but it was literally that, who are the best, military, war fighters in the world. And he had a lot of admiration for the Marines, the general American forces, but he said at the very top, if you're talking special forces, special operations, he said the SAS. Yeah. So, and that's from Captain Dale Dye.
Absolutely. I've got a lot of time for Delta. We went over there before they did the Mogadishu thing, but we went over there to help them try and do Arctic warfare in Wyoming, of all places. But they're fantastic blokes, and they are very much the same mindset. They do joint operations nowadays, or they did do Afghanistan, Iraq, joint operations. The American military would, the American government would actually trust the SES to do operations and stuff like that. So, because they're very much aligned, if that makes sense. So, but don't get me wrong. SEAL Team 6 obviously do their thing as well. But with the SEAL teams, as they're Navy, they're Navy that do a special course, but they call their Navy. Whereas a Delta lad, has probably been 10 years as a Green Beret, and before he even thinks about doing it. So yeah, for me, America, Delta, every time.
Well, you talked about MI5. We're all waiting on bated breath to see who the next James Bond is going to be. So talk to me about, obviously this is a complete, shallow overview, but what is the role, or what is the diverse set of skills of someone working in that world versus the Hollywood, or no, it's not Hollywood, Pinewood Studios action hero that we all grew up with?
Yeah, it's funny because I personally don't know, because MI6 is CIA, MI5 FBI. That's a simple way of doing it. So we got attached to MI5 really because it's Homeland Security, and really it's just advisors, I suppose. But the MI5 don't carry weapons. There was a program over here called Spooks. I'm actually watching it now, because I'm really bored. So I'm on Netflix watching Spooks, not Netflix, on BBC iPlayer, watching Spooks. And Spooks, they're all carrying weapons. Well, they don't carry weapons on the UK mainland, and that's why really we were working with the wrong people. And when I sort of finished my 2 years there, I said, listen, we need to be working with either special branch or the anti-terrorist team, just so you got a weapon. stuff like that. But MI6, right, MI5 really initially, they're they've got a lot on their plate. They're very underfunded, undermanned, not very well paid, to be quite frank. They've got a lot on their plate, so their main role is surveillance, really, first and foremost, and picking up intelligence on the bad people that are coming in the country, and without a shadow of a doubt, you know, I would say they're losing the war because there are so many people getting through the loop now because we've got open borders. You know, jump in a boat, you're welcomed over here. They'll put you in a hotel, you know, even though you haven't got a passport, but bizarrely, you've got a brand new phone, you know, and you're all fighting age. But they're all welcomed, which I totally disagree with, if that makes sense. So, but that puts a lot of pressure, really, later on what MI5 can actually achieve. MI6 slightly different, James Bond thing, but they're the ones that work abroad and do the gatherings. Within these two organisations, you know, they have different departments. We were attached to the surveillance department for MI5. You also have all the desk officers, all the clever people that come out of university. They work at the headquarters, desk officers, all that type of thing. Also, you know, tapping up sources for intelligence. So quite a sort of diverse role. But to put it in perspective, MI5, FBI, CIA, MI6.
I was talking to one of my friends who was former armed police unit in the UK, asking about the troubles that we're seeing at the moment. You know, and obviously nothing is black and white. It's ever apparent that there's a group of extremists, and it doesn't matter if it's a football game or, you know, this horrendous attack. The moment there's an excuse, they're going to go and cause trouble. And it's, you know, my brothers and sisters that are paying the price. The police officers, the firefighters, they're the ones that are holding the line. And he was very, you know, he kind of underlined, hey, yes, you see some of them are in riot gear. You've got police officers wearing regular street gear, no helmet, holding the line against these thugs while they're trying to burn down mosques or, you know, whatever it is that they're doing. But he said the tension, the underlying tension is coming from what you just alluded to. So talk to me about that, because there's a middle ground, of course. You know, Britain's always been a very altruistic, compassionate country. And I always point out that we grew up with John Craven's Newsround and Blue Peter and Live Aid and Comic Relief. I mean, we're a beautifully, you know, altruistic nation. I truly believe that, or at least we used to be. But at the same time, that, you know, don't mistake my kindness for weakness, you know, that can be abused as well. So where are we at the moment? And then where is that middle ground that we should be?
Yeah, unfortunately, we've lost the country, really. We've been sleepwalking. The UK has been sleepwalking to the abyss for many, many years. Ever since, for me, when Margaret Thatcher got ousted out and John Major took over, that was the slippery slope. And then you had Tony Blair take over, who opened all the borders, capitulated everything. You know, the Good Friday Agreement, which, you know, for some people brought about peace in Northern Ireland, but actually let all the bad guys out as part of that agreement. We've got military guys being prosecuted still, while all the bad people that have done all the bad stuff are all walking free. So, yeah, there's a lot of resentment in this country, and a lot of it is because of the immigration policy. Well, we haven't got one, if that makes sense. So that really, so that the riots that we had over the weekend, which were actually quite bad, some of them, exactly the same as what you talked about. So these are normal, majority are normal, concerned citizens, but unfortunately, they attracts a lot of the half-wits, the people that have got no interest really on demonstrating for that cause. They're more intent on stealing and just causing mayhem and stuff like that. And that's just a society that we're living in. You know, the fault of everything. You know, lots of people blame that blame culture, government, and successive governments have put the UK in a position now where actually we're very, very vulnerable. And with what's going on in the world at the moment, you know, we have a very diverse population at the moment who are actually intent on harming each other, which is the way it's going at the moment. You've also got to throw in the mix. You've also got what's going on in the Middle East, which will have massive repercussions on what's happened, what's going to happen here, what's going to happen in the US, because your borders are pretty much open as well, if that makes sense. So, but it's all down to weak leadership, weak governments. Not just this one now, which just happens to be the weakest of the weak, but it's been successive government failures from way back. Margaret Thatcher, as soon as she went, that's when it all started. We've got a military that has been decimated. We've got they can't recruit. There's no retention there. Police going through exactly the same, and it's the police on the front line that are taking all the hassle. And they unfortunately, with the police here at the moment, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. And what I mean by that is there's more threat from the inner side of the police force than it is from someone throwing a rock at your head. And the reason being is if a policeman pulls out his weapon and shoots somebody, he then automatically gets suspended and then goes through a very rigorous and long judicial process as to why he did it. But the people that are trying him and people that are judging him aren't people that have actually pulled the gun out and actually pulled that trigger. So they've not been in the same situation. And I think that's wrong. I think the only person that can judge someone for pulling a trigger is another guy that's actually been in that same position and pulled the trigger, if that makes sense. Because over here, the poor old policeman, he only responds to the intelligence he's been given, for instance. So if he's approaching a car and the car's been involved in an armed robbery before, then he's going to approach that car with a bit of caution, if that makes sense. And if somebody doesn't do something that he says do, then there's a very good chance that he's going to pull his weapon and pull the trigger, if I may. But because he's responding to what he's been told on the radio, and unfortunately, incidents happen over here where a supposed innocent criminal gets shot, and then all of a sudden the poor policeman is the one that's looking at prison time. Because they're not supported. So because of that attitude, and we have it with the military being tried over in Northern Ireland still, people that's 70 years of age still being dragged back to a court to justify a shooting over in Northern Ireland. They're not getting the backup that they actually deserve. And when you're a serving policeman, and again, we're having it here with the military people that are deployed and open fire in Afghanistan, they're now going through that same process. But when you're a policeman and you're serving and you don't get that support, quite rightly, it puts them off thinking, why did they join the police in the first place? So that compounded with what's going on, we're a bit of a tinderbox moment in the UK at the moment. But like I say, it's compounded with events that are going to happen over in the Middle East.
When I look back at so many areas where countries have struggled, including the UK and the US, the resounding common denominator is the tyrannical few deliberately dividing the masses. And therefore, you create the enemy. The enemy is the Labour Party or the Democrats or the Republicans or the Conservatives, or the blacks or the whites or the Muslims or the Christians or the gays or the straights. I mean, you name it, you're put into a pigeonhole and then you're told that's the bad guy, which is what the Nazis did about the Jews. And look what happened. So this is the one thing I think that we need is a massive awakening as a nation to come together. Because you look at, for example, after the Grenfell fire in London, the beautiful community that came together, all these faiths and colors and creeds, that were trying to mitigate this horrendous tragedy and help these poor people that were either, they were grieving family members or they lost their home at least. And so I don't know if you see the same thing, but when I look back, I mean, one thing that saved Maggie Thatcher was the Falklands War. It unified the country, and it saved her political career at that time. And, there's another phrase that goes around a lot in the States. I miss 9/12. That community that came together in New York after that tragedy, or in the States, especially in New York. So what is your perspective of the deliberate division in the UK political side that's driving, because I mean, it couldn't be more apparent during COVID. So that, England or the UK and here, but what is your perspective of that coming from a tight-knit group of men, in this case, that were arguably some of the best leaders in the military?
Yeah, well, I must admit, because you look at the average person on the ground, the normal civilian, when he points out that he's concerned about immigration, automatically he's deemed as extreme right wing. Automatically, when you get common civilians, concerned civilians, gathering together, they're deemed as an extreme right wing organisation, and even the government has come out and said, they're part of the IDF, English, or the EDF, the English Defence thing, or who have actually been disbanded many years, so that they're not even part of it. But when you got the government now, stipulating that these people, and the press and everyone else jumping on that bandwagon, the simple fact is they're not listening to the people on the ground, and this is politicians through and through. Our political system is no longer fit for purpose at all. You've got a Labour Party that's won, a record amount of seats with the fewest votes, even less than what Jeremy Corbyn voted for Jeremy when he got hammered. And then all of a sudden you've got all these people now, very left wing, if that makes sense. So we're a divided society. People on the ground, right wing, or as the government's concerned, right wing extremism. But you've got politicians, very left wing, councillors, very left wing. We are a very divided. And when you get a vote that's divided in an election, a bit like Brexit, when we had the Brexit vote, because it was so close. It was a divided city. It's the same as when Trump lost to Biden. That was quite a close call, really. But what that does is it divides the nation, if that makes sense. Because no matter what Biden does, the Trump supporters are not going to agree with it. Whatever Trump does, the Biden supporters are not going to agree with it. It's a bit the same over here. So we're a very divided nation at the moment. Compounded by Ireland, of all things. So all the immigration, they're having massive immigration problems. So immigrants are coming over here, illegals are coming into the UK, going straight over to Northern Ireland, and then walking across the border into Southern Ireland, and it's causing a lot of discontent by the local people. But again, people have got to take responsibility, and government, get your act together. So as far as I'm concerned, we've lost it. We've lost our country, because it's very difficult now to be able to turn it round. So me and my daughter, we go off and we teach personal safety situation awareness training to youngsters and stuff like that, really, because the streets are not going to get any safer, to be honest, and people need to be a bit more switched on, a bit more aware of what's happening on the ground, really, and how to deal with it, because you've got different cultures coming over here. The UK that you knew has totally changed now. Here in Hereford, little sleepy Hereford here, all the barbers are owned by Albanians or Turks. Most of the coffee shops are owned by Turks or Albanians. The drug trade is run by Turks or Albanians. It's a completely different atmosphere and way of life over here than what it used to be, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Well, I think it's funny when you use the example, Trump and Biden, or Trump and Clinton. You have these two sides and they're ready to kill each other over them. And then I think there's a lot of people in the middle when you actually talk to, and I guess I'm in an echo chamber because everyone on here has served. So that makes you, a little bit more altruistic. May put your life on the line for complete strangers. I think you're a certain kind of human. But most normal people are in the middle going, yeah, there's another question we haven't asked. How the fuck did any of these people get on this ballot in the first place? you're telling me that Tony Blair or John Major are the greatest minds in the UK, or that Donald Trump is the greatest leader? Like, I mean, this is fucking ridiculous. If someone came outside and then just found themselves in either of our two nations, they would be like, yeah, your system is completely broken. You need to totally reinvent the way that you choose these people. And in America, and I use this term a lot, we say it's democracy, it's demostocracy, because you've got to be a millionaire and you've got to have no ethics. Take the money from the weapons manufacturers and the cigarette companies and all the other ones that are giving you and feeding your campaign. So until we, the people, come together and say the way we're choosing these people is clearly wrong, because, for example, we're 70% obese and overweight. Winston Churchill said you can measure the greatness of a nation by the health of its people. Well, there we go. So these are, I mean, the failed war on drugs, prohibition, that was born out of job justification and racism, if you look at the origin story of that. So we've empowered the underworld. We've got all these kind of gang mentality. We've got our children stabbing each other in the UK and stabbing other children in the UK. And then we have this obesity epidemic and this mental health crisis. Clearly, the way that we're choosing these leaders is wrong. So until we come together and shrug off this kind of separatist extremist mentality, we're going to keep getting the same thing over and over again. And the definition of that is insanity.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll tell you what, Guy Fawkes had the right idea. And maybe
I was thinking about him just then.
And just get rid of Parliament completely, if that makes sense. And the reason being is, how can you tell a politician's lying? He's talking.
His lips are moving.
None of them, and they get voted in because they say they're going to do this. And quite recently, we had the leader of the Labour Party giving the Tories a hard time when they were in power. Because they were thinking about taking away the pensioners' winter fuel.
The fuel one, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. First thing, within 1 month of being in power, that's exactly what they've done. And they've given it, and they say it's to save money, and then they go and give a massive pay rise to junior doctors, and the politicians, the amount of money that they earn. Not that they earn it, to be quite frank, but the amount of expenses that they can pull in, and people with two houses. Oh, it's sickening. But nothing changes. Absolutely. We had the young kid is stabbed to death by a black individual who came from original family came from Uganda, I think, something like that.
Rwanda.
Yeah, absolutely. And anyway, so he sort of stabbed these four kids. And then automatically, mental health issues. Hold on, no, it isn't. Don't keep playing the mental health card on people that slaughter other people. Same as the guy, again, the black guy that actually tried to stab the military guy outside his house, really, and it's his wife that came out and saved his life. But again, they're trying to sweep that away because it didn't follow their narrative, if that makes sense, of the government narrative. So an easy way of calling it is, rather than upsetting people, let's call it a sort of I've been into wars and everything, I would never ever think about pulling the old mental health card. If you're a bad guy, you're a bad guy. Admit to it, own it, and flipping get yourself locked away, But we're very divided, and a lot of people are resentful now of politicians. They don't trust them. They're born liars. Our system is completely broken, and I think it's copied in the US as well, where people just they've just given up on it. I didn't even bother voting this year because I just knew it was a waste of time, and sadly, but we're a divided, we're a nation in trouble. Believe you me, we are a nation, and it's because of this sleepwalking to where we are now. Can we recover? Not in my lifetime, I don't think. It's going to take something massive to be able to turn this around, because you've got it's a bit like Northern Ireland in the old days, where Catholics and Protestants didn't trust each other. Very dangerous, volatile environment. we're going to get, all it takes is for a few people, either Brits to stab and kill some Muslims on the street, or vice versa, and it'll ignite, and it will spread from city to city. And bear in mind that some of the cities in the UK are not actually British cities anymore. Rochdale is more of a Muslim city. London's going that way, very much a Muslim enclave, I suppose you would call it. Same as other places as well, So we are Bradford, another one. Yeah, it's trying times, unfortunately, in the UK, as in a lot of places in Europe as well.
Yeah, I mean, with the mental health thing, I mean, I think all malicious murder like that is a mental health issue, but that doesn't dismiss what happened. It's not the sole cause. And again, if there's division, and then you've got the kind of lone wolf mentality, and I don't know if he was groomed by any extremist organization for that particular thing, because it seems like such a bizarre target to choose in the first place. But I mean, you have people who are vulnerable to being swayed one way or another. I mean, great example, fucking Adolf Hitler, for example, the little shitbag that he was. And that can cause absolute devastation. And I think this is the thing, even, with this division, is that there are so many people from different backgrounds and, colors and religions, and I think most of us are so proud to be British, so proud to be American. I mean, I walk outside my front door where I live, and all colors and creeds, and our kids play together, and we say hi when we walk our dogs. But if you allow yourself to be divided, that hateful extremist few are going to project their views on everyone. And then you are going to see this division, like you said, and this projection of race war in America. Like most places, we all get on really well because we see the humanity in each other. But if you allow yourself to buy into that, and now you've got the Klan member on one side and the Black Panther member on the other, and now, like you said, you've got this war escalating where most of the innocents are going to get caught up, just like they did in World War II and all these other conflicts. And, we seem doomed to allow history to repeat itself because we are constantly allowing this tyranny to propagate over and over again.
Yeah, it's funny, because we were involved in Bosnia, and we saw the real bad side of ethnic cleansing, from different divisions and that lot. And I always have flashbacks with that one, thinking, flipping hell, just imagine that happening in the UK, with Brits and Muslims and blacks, and all sorts sort of going against each other, it's just manic. But as I keep going on about, it's successive governments that have got us to this point, but nothing will change. Absolutely not. So we had the 3 kids that were slaughtered. Nothing changes. Knife crime still going up. Same as rural crime, still going up. We're here in Britain. We're a very reactive mindset to criminals, anything else, and we don't do anything until something actually happens to us, and then we'll think about doing it, rather than being quite rightly proactive, and that includes the police. So the police, when they were getting stoned and bottled and everything else, you were just looking at the telly going, flipping, get stuck in there, get the old batons out and start cracking some skulls, and then put them on the back foot, but they weren't. They unfortunately they're following a policy that actually puts the police in harm's way, sadly. Because they, when you've got no reactive mindset, or no proactive mindset, sorry. It does put people in harm's way. So yeah, trying times, unfortunately, here, Europe, predominantly here, because we're with the UK, because we're such a small nation but massively overpopulated. There's no real, I live out in rural Herefordshire, so nice and quiet. But certainly in the inner cities, there's some parts of the UK. I actually found more intimidating than walking around Lagos, or Baghdad, or wherever, purely because of the divisions within that city, the dynamics changing. When's the last time you were in the UK, mate? Matter of interest.
Actually, I've been back several times because I had some family issues to mitigate. So I've been back 3 times in the last year. I took my son back, only 2 months ago now. So recently.
Right. Silly question. Are you a Bath supporter, rugby?
I grew up in the 80s watching, I mean, not so much in rugby and football, watching people stab each other over 11 dudes in short shorts. So I never really got into supporting the team. But yeah, when I was younger, obviously I had an affinity to Bath rugby, but I don't watch rugby that much. I only watch football every 2 years. I just watch the Euro and then I'll watch the World Cup in a couple of years. But yeah, I like playing sports more than watching sports.
Yeah, well, I must, because me and my daughter are staunch Leicester Tiger fans, rugby. And the reason being is football. The mentality of these people that watch football is totally different to the mentality, of watching rugby. Like, it's a different world, different mindset. And we're fairly local to Gloucester. So when Gloucester are playing the Tigers, me and my daughter go down there, annoy all the Gloucester fans with our Leicester shirts and stand in there. It's called the Shed. And we stand in with all the Gloucester fans, annoying them because we always win, apart from last year. But it's great because it's really good banter. You don't get that at football. It's very tribal. Never again would I watch football.
Well, speaking of your daughter, let's transition from your military career into what you're doing now, and then let's start with the safety of our young people, especially in schools.
Yeah, so 2 years ago, I was in The Hague. I was head of security for a company called SBM Offshore for 15 years. Initially based in Lagos, Nigeria, then moved up to Monaco, sipping my pink champagne. And then 3 years there, I was on the verge of resigning because I didn't like Monaco, to be honest. When you're a military guy, Monaco's a bit too quiet. So they moved us up to The Hague. We got an office in Amsterdam at Schiphol at the airport. So I lived in The Hague. Didn't want to live in Amsterdam. Amsterdam's a bit like London, good for a weekend, not so good for being there all the time. So I lived in The Hague. So 7 years later, so 2 years last May, or 2 years May gone by, I just decided that I wanted to do something different. So wrote a book called Life on the Edge. Unfortunately, the author died. So we class it as a co-author, so it's a co-written book. But the co-writer, Nicole Johnson, she passed away about 10 weeks ago now. But she was very ill for about 9 months before that. So we put the book on hold, really, because I wanted to finish it with her. And it's a book about helping people. It's not a typical Bravo, SAF Bravo 20 type book. It's more akin to the personal side of an SAS guy, the married side of it, the kids and all that type of stuff. And using a sort of biography type mentality is just going through the hiccups that we have in life and how you circumnavigate it. Plan B, that didn't work. Okay, don't worry about it. No dramas. Plan B, we'll do this based on some of the stuff that we went through. And unfortunately, so she passed away. So there's a young lady from Scotland who knows Nicole, who is going to finish the book. So the first chapter is going to be a remembrance type chapter about Nicole. And then the final chapter is all about what me and my daughter have been doing for the last 10 months or 12 months or whatever. And then it'll be good to go. So the timeline is we're hoping to get it finished by March next year to coincide with the Hay Festival, because the Hay Festival is just down the road from here. So I would be classed as a local author, which would be great. So we've done that. That's done and dusted. But on the other side is because I've been in the security industry for 22 years. I'm not a big fan of security companies. So I decided to start my own security company up. But it's called Hawks & Co. And it's me and my daughter at the moment. I've got 3 boys in the military, so hopefully that they will come and join us at some stage. And the idea by it was to help youngsters, adults, vulnerable people. So we do personal safety and situational awareness. And then my daughter does breakaway and restraint stuff and all that. So the physical side of it, my daughter does. And the reason being is my daughter is she's of the same ilk as my three boys, but she's a girly girly. She's got a fearsome left hook, and she's very good at what she does. In fact, because she's actually taught by some very good people who sort of took her under her wing, and she's more believable. When you're teaching kids personal safety, situational awareness, it's all well and good being an ex-SAS guy, but the kiddies don't actually relate to you. They'll relate to Keely. So having that soft side, if that makes sense. So when it comes to all the physical side of it, she does it because they can see how easy it is to do a breakaway by using the body mechanics. Because self-defense is not for everyone. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to give confidence to everyone. You can only teach certain individuals self-defense for them to take it in, and actually for them to practice it on the ground, different in a gym, if that makes sense. So with breakaway, it's more acceptable for them to, okay, if someone's strangling me, yes, I can push the elbows in and I can force them away. But it's all geared to keeping yourself out of trouble. So breakaway, move away, if that makes sense. It's not about getting into trouble. So trying to make it more believable, really, and more realistic for the average normal person, if that makes sense. And that's gone really well at the moment. But on the back of that, we are trying to get into the rural farm industry. Reason being, when I did my undercover days and working with MI5, we got very good at breaking into places. So on the back of that, covertly. So if you can covertly break into somewhere, it means you're better than the people that normal. Cause it's easy to smash a window and break in, but trying to covertly get in there. So we're very good at what we do, which is why we're going to be going down there and talking about penetration testing of organizations, because we're pretty good. So to help the farmers, so I live on a farm, and it's the old poacher turned gamekeeper mentality. And unfortunately here in the UK, it's the same as farms all around the world. There is zero security culture on a farm. You can walk on any farm with a high visibility vest with NFU, the National Farming Union logo on the back, wave at somebody, and then walk over to a car and steal the car and drive away. Reason being, all the cars have got keys in the ignition, because that's the culture of the farming industry, and that's why they're deemed as very easy targets. The crime rate over in the UK for farmers is astronomical, because that the criminals are very, very clever they're not in jail for a very good reason. They're good at what they do, and unfortunately, and I excuse the pun, but the farms are deemed as cash cows, really, to criminals, because they're easy, and farmers work really, really hard. They keep the economy going. They don't have a lot of money, so the way we go about helping them is we'll go and do a little security assessment with them, which is not going to cost them a penny. And then we will, all the recommendations for security we'll actually do with them. We'll help you do this, because if you give a farmer a lot of security recommendations, you might as well write that in Swahili and give it to him, because he's going to read it and not interested. And if there's a massive bill at the end of it, he ain't going to do it, because these farmers don't have a lot of money. So what we're trying to say is, listen, insurance companies, NFU, you employ me. Any farm that gets hit, rural crime attack on it, we'll go and help them. Because what happens at the moment is a farmer will call the police to say that there's a robbery. The police won't respond because they're very undermanned and underfunded. So they'll just give a crime report number. They'll put the phone down. They'll then the insurance companies will replace a tractor that's been stolen. 6 months later, brand new tractor stolen again. because that cycle doesn't change. So what we're saying is, listen, you employers, to any farm that gets broken into, we'll go down there and we'll improve the security by doing a bit of training with them, spend 2 or 3 days down there, bit of training, trying to change that culture, that security culture, improve the security of the farms, make sure that what happened last time is going to happen again. Give them confidence about dealing with confrontation. Because over here, the police automatically say, listen, if there's a confrontation, just go and lock yourself in your barn or go and lock yourself in your house and call the police. But the police ain't going to respond. So that doesn't give the farmers any confidence at all. So me and my daughter deal with confrontation and how you can escalate it, or majority of the times how to de-escalate it if need be. And all we're doing is trying to give the farmer and his family a bit more confidence, if that makes sense. So the cost to the farmer, zero, nothing at all. So if it's not going to cost the farmer anything, because you're using all the assets on the farm, but in a way that you're going to improve the security. Your CCTV camera up there is pants. Let's move it to a different location. Lighting, really poor. Let's move your light over here. Bit of lateral thinking, right? You don't want people to go into that field. Let's go and get these planks of wood, stick a load of 6-inch nails in there, camouflage it up. No one's going to go in that field. Or if they do, they're certainly not going to get back out again. A bit of lateral thinking, if that makes sense, and all at zero cost. And so if a farmer reads a report and he knows it's not going to cost him anything to improve his security, there's a good chance that he's going to improve his security because it's of no cost. When you give a farmer something that's going to cost him 40 grand, £40,000 to improve, then they're not going to do it. They're going to rip it up, and I can't afford that. And so nothing changes, if that makes sense. But trying to get that across to the farming industry is very difficult because they're very set in their ways. They're very reliant on the rural crime units coming to the rescue. But the rural crime units are very undermanned and very underfunded. I was down Wiltshire not that long ago, giving a presentation to the rural crime units down there. And they've got 8 people to cover the second biggest county in England. It's just madness, and and also the farmers don't have a lot of respect, probably a bit of a harsh word, but they don't have confidence in the police's ability to be able, when you ring up and say, I've lost 40,000, blah, 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 and the police come back and say, okay, here's the crime number, that they're not going to come out to investigate. And again, all them bridges that were there before are slowly collapsing, if that makes sense. So yeah, we just feel that by putting an arm around people, we can help people. Now I've been in the industry too long to worry about how much money am I going to make for doing this, which is what the security companies do. Believe you me, first and foremost for the security company, how much can we make by approaching this guy? First and foremost, it should be the other way around. How can I help you? What's your budget? Yeah, we'll make it work. If that makes sense. We quite recently, I went down to Dartmoor to help a farmer down there. A good friend of mine said, Mick, how much is it going to cost to come down? I said, listen, tell the farmer he can pay for the fuel to get me down there, and make me a bacon sandwich when I get there. And we spent 5 hours on the farm improving his security. Quite recently, we got asked by the security industry. They said, Mick, can you run 6 sessions with your daughter doing this, that, and the other? How much is it going to cost? And I went, how much are you paying the other people? And she said that this. And I said, well, that'll do me. If you're paying people that, who am I to say no? I want this amount. Because we're all in the same game of helping people. So it's trying to be pragmatic and realistic when you're dealing with, because people don't have a lot of money in security. To be honest, schools, for instance, don't have big budgets. So work with the schools and work within budget, if that makes sense, rather than trying. Because if you say to a school, this is how much it's going to cost you, they'll bulk straight away, and so ultimately the people that you want to help don't get the help that they really need, because the person in charge can't afford to do it, and that seems to be the problem. So that's why we started Hawks and Co. To really to help people.
I grew up on a farm in, like I said, in Corsham, and it butted up against a MOD base. So ironically, we were talking about Ireland earlier, when they were bombing on the homeland, on the mainland, excuse me. We had to sweep the car for bombs. We had the little stick with the mirror, and which is awesome as a small child to just hope that you're not going to get blown up on the way to school. But when I think about the farm, there were a lot of soft areas, because you might have a fence, but I mean, these fences you can climb in a moment. But when I think about what was good, though, aside from the shotguns that we had in the house, was the German shepherds that we had roaming everywhere, and they were phenomenal deterrents. So taking that much larger scale rural model, which not many people probably listening are on a farm at this moment, what are the principles that you apply to any sort of security, whether it's a farm or whether it's a flat? Because when I think about as a firefighter, there's so many facades of security. And I know, for example, that fire alarms and then, security alarms for the police department are, we will respond non-emergency, but 99% of the time they're bullshit. So it really creates complacency. When I think about windows and doors, I mean, we have to get in to go get the people. We know how flimsy they actually are in real life. So what are some of the principles that maybe people aren't thinking about that they can apply to their, whether it's, like I said, an apartment, a flat, or their farm, that maybe are contrary to what these security companies are selling them with their alarms and their cameras and all the things?
Yeah, think like a criminal. Think like a criminal, and the reason I say that, and that's all part of this security culture. I'm not a fan of CCTV monitoring devices on farms until the farmer has actually got a security culture, because you'll spend thousands putting all these gadgets, and then the farmer will leave the gate open, if that makes sense, and it's just a waste of money. And bear in mind that you've got 20 people working on a farm, maybe, so that's 20 potential CCTV units walking around, but they just need to be guided in the right. So for anyone doing anything, before you even get out of the car, just think how a criminal will operate. So when I'm locking my door at night, when I'm leaving, I'm stood outside. Would a criminal be able to get in here? Have I left a window open? No. Yes, go in there, shut the window and stuff like that. It's all about putting yourself in the shoes of the bad people, because if you can think like a criminal, you can deter and what they, or counter what they're about to do, if that makes sense. And that's really the simplistic approach, really, of doing it. But always have a security culture about you before you even think about investing in lots of money, which, like I say, is totally wasted if you've got people that have got no security culture, because they'll just leave a gate open. And again, that's my dig at security companies, because they make a lot of money by recommending this, that, and the other, but they tend to invest. They don't invest in the actual individual who's supposedly going to operate, and that's over here. Rural crime actually is at its peak between 1 o'clock in the morning and 4 in the morning. They've all got masks on. CCTV, waste of time. Alarm goes off, waste of time. No one's going to respond at 4 o'clock in the morning or 3 o'clock in the morning because the police are not operating. So no one's going to respond. So that doesn't worry them. Monitoring devices, not worried. No one's going to respond to it. So all that gadgetry just absolutely goes out the window. So right, here we go. I'm gonna break into this barn. Oh right, okay. So they've locked it. They've had the foresight ready to actually lock it and stash things away and this, that, and the other. And that's what we're trying to get across to the farmers, really, is do the basics right. Because at the moment, security for a farmer is a chore. And when you've got 50 chores to do on a farm, safety and security tend to be at the bottom of the list. But if you can get a security culture going, it no longer becomes a chore. It becomes second nature. So taking the key out of the ignition becomes second nature. A bit like the fire service, a bit like us. I teaching situation awareness. We try to explain to people. My situation awareness has come from 50 years working in the security industry and the military, surviving battlefields, blah blah blah. All this stuff. That's where I am with my situation awareness. You can't read a book, you can't listen to someone talking and become situationally aware. You understand the theory behind it, and it really comes with you then going out and practicing it. Every single day before it becomes second nature. So as you step outside of your door, you look left and right and just see what's on the street before you go to it. Before, as you walk into your car to get in it, your keys are out and they're in your hand. So as soon as you get to your car, you can lock your door, get in, and you're away, if that makes sense. But females especially, and I always have a dig at females on the thing. Car parks are a hive, especially at night time, for criminality. And unfortunately for the ladies, they have huge handbags. And it literally takes them 10 minutes to find their car keys. Criminals know that, you know what I mean? And so if you can get into the habit, ladies, of walking to your car with your car key in your hand, so that as soon as you're at the car, bang, doors open, in, locked, and away you go. It's doing the basics right, if that makes sense, and just thinking like a criminal. Is probably the easiest way of sort of doing it.
I want to hit one more quick topic and then close this out because we've been talking almost 2.5 hours. I want to be mindful of your time and let you let your dogs out. But when we are looking reactively, because right now that's where we are in the UK. I'm not going to go on the personal weapon side because I know in the UK especially people's hands are so tied as far as what they can carry. But the armed police have had on the show talking about the lack of support, like you said, the cases against some of these officers and the massive kind of hand in of that specialty by a lot of the Met Police. What needs to happen as far as the armed response? I came from England to America, had a very kind of anti-gun mentality when I first got here. And I'll be completely honest, I did weapons training. I didn't own a gun, but I did weapons training. But then I was locked into my son's school, his elementary school, when they had their first ever code red, actual code red, where they thought someone was coming in to kill children. And I realized how fucking vulnerable these children, these teachers, everyone that was in there. And I was literally thinking about pulling the guillotine off the paper, guillotine machine, and like, all right, this is it. I got a blade. That's all I can. And then who knows what he or she has got if they come through the door. Thank God it was not a false alarm, but the person never actually did what they threatened to do. But it really opened my eyes. And now I've owned a Glock and I've had one for a long time. And my mind shifted not from I'm going to walk around like John Wayne, but I am a firefighter and a paramedic. I have a diverse toolbox. Well, in that, I need to have something that counters someone that walks into a Taylor Swift, yoga studio and starts slashing 6 to 10-year-olds. And a ballistic vest and a gun are a great way to oppose that. So what is your kind of philosophy on what armed policing at the moment? Ultimately, it would be beautiful if we could reduce the weapons in the UK and get back to the environment that you and I grew up in. But at this moment in 2024, what should the armed policing model look like?
Yeah, it's. I'm a big believer. Bear in mind, I've done a lot of undercover stuff, if that makes sense. So armed. And my last 2 years in the SAS was I used to run the CQB cell, close quarter battle cell, for guys going undercover, shouting operations, if that makes sense. So I'm a big believer now that we've gone past the point in the UK of people not being armed. When you have so many people now, for instance, that guy with a knife, you can't take on criminals that are more heavily armed than what the police are. But you can't just say, right, policeman, here we go. Here's your weapon. The whole concept needs to change. All the police in Northern Ireland carry weapons. Now, Northern Ireland, call me old-fashioned, is part of the UK. So why can't we copy that model and bring it over into England, Scotland, Wales, and stuff like that? Because it's now beyond really asking the police to put their lives on the line with a baton or with a taser when you're up against a guy who's got a weapon. And when I mean a weapon, I also mean a sword as well. Bear in mind that a knife and a sword can do just as much damage than a shotgun or whatever, like, you know. So yeah, I'm all for the police in the UK being armed, but it has to change, because once you pull that trigger, and we had a philosophy really slightly different, you know, SAS mentality. But we had a philosophy that if you were going to pull your weapon, never think twice, and always have in the back of your mind that it's always better to be tried by 12 and carried by 6. And if in doubt, you know, take them on, like, you know. Unfortunately, with the police here, a lot of the police have been handing their weapons in purely because internally, you know, they're damned if they do and damned if they don't, like, you know. And it's a nasty culture, knowing that if you do pull your weapon, that you're not going to get any support. So I'm all for arming the police, but you also have to bring in a culture of you know, like in our days in the SAS, you have to support that individual, no matter what. When he pulls the trigger, you have to support that individual as to why he pulled the trigger. Sometimes you're going to get accidents that happen, and we understand that. But you know, that's not damn someone instantly just because in his mindset he was taking on a bad guy, like, you know. So it's, yeah, I'm all for arming, but it's very easy to say that. It's very difficult to get that mentality and culture within the police force right, you know. So let's get, you know, let's get Northern Ireland police people over into the UK to try and establish that culture. But we're way past that point now of police being unarmed on the street. It's just madness. It just puts it doesn't give the police any confidence at all. You ask a policeman to walk down a dark alley, and you know, there's possibility of 2 or 3 guys down there that may have a weapon. Call me old-fashioned, but the policeman ain't going to walk down there. And because you haven't given him the tools and the confidence to do that, like, you know. So yeah, so that's my philosophy, mate. Is we should all the police should be armed, but it's not that simple. You know, it needs to, the whole culture needs to change to support the police. I do feel for the police. They're in a real sticky situation. They're following a real completely guff policy. You look at Metropolitan Police at the moment. The Metropolitan Police don't think for themselves, unfortunately. The Lord Mayor dictates how they do their policy. That then goes to the commissioner, the Metropolitan Commissioner, who then filters that down to the actual people on the ground, like, you know. And that's why you see the very softly approach to people waving banners supporting terrorism, people carrying knives or swords, you know, if it's part of a protest or whatever, like, you know. So yeah, it needs to change completely. But yeah, arm them.
One of the armed response guys made a really good point. If we don't if we don't support those teams, which I know sometimes train, you know, with you guys, I mean, they're trained by the most elite warfighters on the planet, and we don't support them, then eventually, as you said, they'll give guns to all the police officers. They're going to have to. And now you've got, you know, the best police officers, but also the worst. And we're all completely familiar with those videos of our worst police officers in the UK and the US, and you're giving them a gun. What is the likelihood of a bad shoot after that? Why are we not supporting the people that are highly trained and holding them to a high standard before we have a complete, you know, saturation of firearms, which is going to amplify the possibility that one of your loved ones is shot by mistake by some incompetent, police officer holding a firearm, because now it's out of necessity rather than proactively training the elite teams and supporting them in their actions.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's all to do with that recruiting thing in the first place. Because at the moment, the way the recruits are picked in the police force, it's more geared towards education, as opposed to knowledge on the ground, streetwise. Young kid from the estate. Some of these kids on the estate would make fantastic police officers, because half of them know what the criminals get on with. When you've been, sent to university for years, you're college, university, you're not really that, a street copper, if that makes sense. And so the whole policy of it. So if you're thinking right now, we need to edge our way toward not only specialist units within the police, but everybody now is going to be armed. Then that all comes down to a different way you recruit your people. Like, it's a bit like the military. You need people that are a bit more robust, and change it. So it's not a case of let's arm everybody now but no, the whole needs to change. But unfortunately, we're not only the specialist units, the armed response units, because they can only take them so long. We do a lot of active shooter training. I was in Houston about 18 months ago doing a company over there. Because they like the Brits, because we're a bit more down to earth. If you American security guy, ballistic doors, seventh floor of an office building, ballistic door here, ballistic door there. It's going to cost you $1 million. No, you don't. You don't need any of that crap. Get rid of that. Which is why they send us over there, but more down to earth. But when we do the active shooter training type stuff, it's all geared to trying to get away, if that makes sense. But we follow the American approach, because we know over here they do a maraudering terrorist attack training, active shooter. They call it marauders, but it's all geared to a police response. Now, you and I know that any terrorist incident that's going to occur, or an active shooter, is going to be done, dusted, and finished before the police turn up, if that makes sense. So everybody needs to be a bit more robust. How we go about how to protect ourselves, our loved ones, and everything else. So we follow the American thing of run, hide, fight. Over here it's run, hide, tell. Run, hide, fight is how we do it, because we're not bothered now. I'm not thinking about a police response. And bearing in mind, how you respond when the police turn up can actually get you shot by the police themselves, if that makes sense. So so it's all slightly different mentality. Now we've got a thing called Martin's Law. It's not a Martin's Law. So this after Manchester bombing, there's a young lady whose son died in it. And she's been pushing for this Martin's Law. Good on her. God bless her for doing it. But that was 7 years ago, mate. 7 years ago. 7 years in the make, and it's still not been sort of pushed through and everything else, which is ridiculous. So since the Paris attacks, 2015, we've been all around the world teaching all our officers, active shooter, what to do if you're involved in a terrorist incident. And the way we go about it is when the police teach it, but when the police teach it, what they do is they pick certain individuals within the company to play a key role. If there's a code red, as you call it, play a key role. Now that's great until that key player gets the back of his head shot off. You know what I mean? So we don't do that. We teach everybody, from the cleaner to the CEO to the principal, to everybody gets taught what their options are when there's an active shooter, and what to do, this, that, and the other. And the reason being is what you're hoping on the day is somebody comes to the fore, really, because people that think they're leaders are great up until someone starts shooting at them, because you don't know how you're going to react until you've actually been shot at, and that's true. So rather than just teaching, certain individuals, self-important people, that I'm going to be the one. No, you're not. So it's a matter of making sure that everybody goes through the training, so that everybody understands what their options are, and then you just go for it. and then hope on the day that it all works out, if that makes, and that's all you can do. But you've got to give people the tools and the knowledge of understanding what their options are when a code red gets called. Just otherwise, you've got people running around like headless chickens, and nothing gets done. But you were right, alluded to there. If you can't escape, find yourself a weapon. A fire extinguisher, the guillotine blade, as you mentioned there, is perfect. But do something, because doing nothing. So if you've got a nice big room like this and a guy walks in the door with an AK-47, there's 20 of you in there, and there's no exit, and you do nothing at all, 20 people dead. But if one or two of you decide to go for it and try to overpower him, and 3 or 4 people get killed doing that, but they managed to overpower him, that means 16 people managed to survive. So having that mentality is how you get yourself through adversity, if that makes sense. It's a difficult one. It's not the nicest subject to teach, but unfortunately in this day and age, especially in the States, it's something that everybody needs to understand, and just know what your options are. And it's not geared towards specific individuals. A cleaner is just as adept at surviving a shooting incident than any security guy or any CEO or any bigwig manager. And sometimes it's that cleaner that actually comes to the fore, and because the poor old manager's just been shot, or has suddenly realised it's not nice being shot at, so I'm out of it. If that makes sense. So it's we're trying to keep a level head on things, especially subjects that are not nice to teach, but people need to understand it.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's a beautiful place to round off. So for people listening, you got the book that will be coming out, and then you've got Hawks & Co., your business that's kind of growing and growing now. Where are the best places online to find you online itself or on social media?
Yeah, we're very loud and vocal. LinkedIn, on there first and foremost. There's a nice person called Sebastian, who's over in Jersey, who does all my social media for LinkedIn, not LinkedIn, Instagram, and all that sort of stuff. So he does that. We're actually doing quite a few podcasts. So I've actually just got 2 emails from American companies that want to do podcasts with us because of what they've seen before. It's a bit like you got our attention, obviously, because you saw one of our podcasts, and that's really how. And for us, I like doing podcasts purely because it gets us out there. It gives us a voice to explain what we're all about, really. But hopefully by the next, I know my hair's getting a bit long now, and on Tuesday tomorrow I'll be down there getting it cut, but not short. I'm just going to get the curls cut out.
Well, I want to thank you so much. We've gone all over the place, and obviously there's a lot of conversation about the war on terror, that kind of period of military history. But to dive into the Falklands or some of the other conversations, and then your perspective on the division and the violence and school safety and farm safety has been incredible. So I want to thank you so much for being so generous with your time and coming on the Behind the Shield podcast today.
My absolute pleasure, and I'm just surprised that the dogs were well behaved. Apart from the odd little fight. I've got 2 French bulldogs, and they can be they like plenty of attention.
Brilliant. I'm going to hit stop there. Just stand by a second. This program uploads. Hopefully, it'll upload